All right, we've got some breaking news from the United Kingdom and the royal family.
That night, loud alarm bells suddenly rang after the security cameras noticed strange movement inside the Royal Archive, the place where rare and valuable treasures were kept away from the public, and in those few confusing minutes, a palace bodyguard was caught and arrested near the storage area because he was believed to be trying to enter the jewelry collection as part of a blackmail plan. But the more Princess Anne carefully studied the situation, the more she felt that everything had been planned too carefully and was not done suddenly. And when she checked the bodyguard's recent contacts, an unexpected name appeared: Andrew Parker B.S., Camilla's former husband, which made her wonder if this was just a strange coincidence or if a hidden plan had already entered deep into the royal family, and if Andrew was really involved, what exactly he wanted. A few days earlier, Buckingham Palace had been quiet as usual, with long hallways and old stone walls full of history resting peacefully. After a day of events and private meetings, while soft golden light from crystal chandeliers spread across the smooth marble floors, and no one could have imagined that everything would suddenly change in just a few seconds, but without warning the alarm broke the silence. Loud sirens echoed through every floor, red lights flashed along the corridors, automatic doors slammed shut and locked, and the royal security team quickly moved into emergency mode, acting fast and in an organized way to seal the jewelry archive room in less than 3 minutes so that no one, not even the most powerful people, could enter or leave. Princess Anne was in her private library nearby, and as soon as she heard the alarm, she stood up at once, leaving her half-read history book behind, her heart beating fast not from fear but from a strong feeling that something was wrong, and she walked quickly down the corridor with her low-heeled shoes making steady sounds on the stone floor. And when she arrived, many MI5 agents in black suits with earpieces and weapons had already formed a tight protective circle around the archive door, and she calmly said that she needed to go inside immediately, while a senior agent stepped forward, bowed slightly, and told her the situation was under control and that they had caught a suspect who was one of their own bodyguards, which made Anne frown as she asked which one, and the agent replied it was Thomas Hale, who had been seen acting suspiciously near the archive and was clearly shown on camera trying to disable the motion sensors, causing a cold feeling to run down Anne's spine because Hale was well known to her, having served the royal family for over 15 years and protected them on many trips abroad as a quiet, serious, and highly professional man, which made her question how this could happen, and she ordered to see the footage. So in a temporary control room, a large screen showed Hale in his uniform walking slowly toward the archive door, stopping to look around before taking out a small device used to break electronic locks, but before he could act the alarm went off, red lights flashed, doors locked, and 4 agents rushed in to stop him while he did not fight back and simply lowered his head with a pale face under the bright lights. Anne watched closely, trying to understand his expression, seeing no strong fear or resistance but only a disturbing silence. And when she asked if he had said anything, the agent replied not much, saying Hale admitted trying to enter the vault and claimed he acted alone, and they believed it might be an extortion plan to steal items and demand money later, after which Anne turned and quickly went to King Charles's private room where Charles III had just finished speaking with the Prime Minister, and when she entered he immediately noticed her serious expression and asked what had happened in a concerned voice, and she closed the door, sat across from him, and explained that a bodyguard had been caught trying to break into the jewelry room and that MI5 had locked down the area, thinking it was a personal theft for ransom, and Charles stayed silent for a few seconds with his fingers tightening on the chair as he asked if it was Hale, and Anne confirmed but said she did not believe it was only his idea because Hale was not someone who acted without thinking and had served them too long to suddenly become greedy, and she believed someone had approached, tempted, or pressured him, and if that was true then the person behind it understood the royal security system very well, including schedules, camera locations, and how to disable sensors, and Charles slowly nodded because he trusted his sister's judgment, knowing she did not suspect things without reason, and he said they needed a quiet investigation with no information reaching the public because if this was someone from inside, the outcome would be very serious, and Anne looked straight into his eyes. I want to handle this myself, with help from royal security and MI5. We cannot allow any danger to come to the monarchy from the inside, Anne said firmly, and Charles paused for a moment before slowly nodding and replying, very well, but Anne, be careful, because if there really is someone controlling this from behind, they will not give up easily. And after that night, Anne hardly slept at all as the camera footage of Thomas Hale kept playing again and again in her mind. Because the bodyguard she had once trusted was now a suspect, yet Anne knew that a man like Hale would not suddenly take such a careless and dangerous step without a reason, which meant someone must be behind it, and she was fully determined to discover who it was. So with Charles's permission from the night before, within 2 hours royal security delivered a highly secure laptop that contained all of Thomas Hale's surveillance data, and she sat in her small private study on the 3rd floor and carefully went through every single detail, including duty schedules, movement records, phone contacts, and even keycard access logs, working with complete focus like a skilled investigator rather than a royal, until by noon one small detail made her suddenly stop, because in Hale's travel record from 3 days earlier, he had visited a private club in Mayfair called the Cavalry Club, a place known for rich people and retired military officers, where he stayed for more than an hour and a half. And when this information was checked with traffic cameras and facial recognition systems, it showed that the man who entered with Hale and sat across from him in a quiet corner was Andrew Parker B.S., Camila's former husband, who had once been a cavalry officer and a well-known figure in royal social circles during the 1970s and 80s. And although he still had connections with many important people, he had rarely been seen in public since Camila married Charles, making this meeting between Hale and Andrew far too suspicious to ignore, especially since the Cavalry Club was not a place Hale usually visited, as in 10 years of service he had only gone there once before, causing Anne's heart to beat faster as she wondered why Andrew was involved, because he was not a stranger to her, as she had met him many times at family events where he was always polite, clever, and clearly ambitious, and recently she had heard rumors that his business efforts after retirement were failing, with bad property investments and growing debts, which made her question if there could be a connection, though she did not rush to make conclusions because there was still no clear proof and it could have been a simple meeting between old acquaintances or something harmless, but the situation was too suspicious to ignore, so Anne immediately called the head of the MI5 team helping her, a middle-aged man named Robert Lang who had experience with sensitive royal internal cases, and she spoke clearly over a secure line, telling him, "Robert, I need a quiet investigation into Andrew Parker B.S., including all his recent contacts, phone calls, emails, movements, and finances if possible, especially any contact with Thomas Hale in the past month, and it must be fast but completely secret," and Lang quickly replied, "We will begin immediately, and I will report directly to you as soon as we find anything new," after which Anne ended the call and walked to the window that looked over Buckingham Gardens, where the rain had stopped but the sky was still grey and heavy, while a quiet anger grew inside her, not just toward Andrew but toward the idea that someone within their trusted circle could betray the monarchy, as she had already seen too many scandals and too many cracks in the family's perfect image, and this time she promised herself it would not happen again. And then on the evening of March 12th, exactly 2 days after the incident, the first report from Lang reached her, and although it was short, it was deeply disturbing, as it revealed that Andrew Parker B.S. had used a burner phone just hours after Hale was arrested and then immediately got rid of it, showing clearly that this was not just a coincidence, and going back 3 weeks earlier, it was the time when the pressure of financial failure began to surround Andrew Parker B.S., because after leaving the military and retiring, he had invested himself in property business hoping to secure a comfortable life. But the London market became extremely difficult as interest rates rose sharply, property prices dropped quickly, and bank loans built up into a heavy burden of debt, leaving Andrew, who had once lived a high-class life, now facing a hard and painful reality, spending many evenings alone in his large house in Wiltshire while staring at financial records with a tired face and red eyes from lack of sleep and stress, and despite everything, he still kept secret contact with Camila, his former wife who was now queen. There were no public meetings, only late-night phone calls and hidden messages sent through secure apps, and one evening near the end of February 2026, he drove to a small house on the edge of London, a place Camila sometimes used for private meetings far from the eyes of the media, and when Camila arrived, Andrew could no longer keep his usual calm and polished behavior, as he dropped heavily onto the sofa with shaking hands while holding a glass of whiskey, and he said in a strained voice, "Camila, I am about to go bankrupt, the Kensington project have failed, the banks are taking everything, and I have no way out," and Camila listened quietly with a calm face but sharp, thinking eyes, because she knew Andrew still carried old secrets from their past marriage, details that could seriously damage the royal family if they were ever revealed, and she did not want him to become a dangerous problem. And then after a short silence, an idea came into her mind, and she spoke in a low but clear voice, "Andrew, listen, the royal family owns a huge jewelry collection, and I'm not talking about the famous pieces, I mean the ones that are rarely used and kept quietly in Buckingham storage rooms. They are worth millions, but no one would notice for some time if a few were gone temporarily." And Andrew looked at her, first confused and then doubtful, asking, "You mean steal them?" And Camila answered in a cold tone, "Not steal forever. Just take them for a short time. We arrange it through a trusted bodyguard. He takes a few items and hides them, then sends a ransom demand. The family will pay because they will not want a scandal or the press to find out that jewelry is missing, and after we get the money, we return the items and everything ends quietly. No one is harmed and you get enough money to clear your debts." And Andrew stayed silent for a long time because he understood how risky this was. But his desperation had already taken control of his thinking, and he finally asked, "Who would do it?" And Camila replied, "I know someone, Thomas Hale, a long-serving bodyguard who worked in Charles' team. You have seen him at military events, and he is dealing with family money problems because his eldest daughter needs to pay for university. So he will agree if the payment is good." And Andrew slowly nodded as the plans started to form, and he contacted Hale using a burner phone. And their first meeting happened at the Cavalry Club in Mayfair, a quiet and familiar place for both of them, where Andrew explained the plan in simple terms and promised a large payment of £500,000 after the job was done, and although Hale hesitated at first, when he heard the amount and Andrew gave him £20,000 in cash as an advance, he agreed, and then one day before the incident, Camilla personally met Hale at a small, quiet cafe in Chelsea, wearing a long coat and a hat that partly hid her face, and she handed him a thick envelope while saying, "This is the advance. And the arranged shift schedule. Tomorrow you will be on the night shift. The archive will have very little supervision. Take 3 items, Queen Mary's pearl necklace, the sapphire earrings, and the white gold bracelet. They are rarely shown, so it will take days before anyone notices. Then send the ransom demand through a secure method and leave no trace." And Hale held the envelope tightly with a shaking voice and asked, "What if I get caught?" And Camilla answered confidently, "You will not get caught. There are weak points in the security system that we have checked, and if anything goes wrong, just stay silent and we will take care of the rest." And so the next night when Hale entered the archive room with a device to break the lock, the alarm suddenly went off and everything failed within minutes, and Andrew soon received an encrypted message from an unknown number saying the plan had failed and Hale had been arrested. And he sat frozen in his dark living room as the glass of whiskey slipped from his hand and broke on the floor, while Camilla inside the palace also received the report from a private source and gripped the armrest tightly as the colour left her face, because both of them knew that if Hale spoke, everything would be exposed. And in the days that followed, the heavy intense feeling inside Buckingham Palace did not change, and Princess Anne decided she would not wait any longer because she now had enough clues to move faster, including the secret meeting between Thomas Hale and Andrew Parker BS and the burner phone call made right after Hale's arrest. And although the situation was becoming clearer, she still did not have a direct confession from Hale, so she decided it was time to make him speak, and she ordered MI5 to arrange a detailed interrogation session the very next morning in a private annex building within the royal security area, a place used for sensitive cases rather than a public prison, and Hale was brought in wearing handcuffs with a tired face after 3 days in custody, while bright white lights shone directly into his eyes making him squint, and MI5 team leader Robert Lang sat across from him with a calm but sharp voice and said, "Thomas, we know you did not act alone. Who contacted you and who promised you money? Tell us and we can suggest lighter punishment." But Hale kept his head down with his lips tightly closed and only repeated one line. "I acted alone. I needed money for my daughter." "There was no one else," Hale repeated firmly, and Lang slowly pushed a set of photos from the Cavalry Club cameras across the table, showing Hale and Andrew Parker BS sitting face to face in what clearly looked like a serious discussion, and Lang said, "This was 3 days before the incident. Andrew Parker BS, what were you talking about with him?" And Hale quickly glanced at the photos before looking away and replying, "An old friend. We were just having a drink," while Princess Anne watched the entire interrogation from the observation room through a one-way glass window, gripping the chair tightly as her anger grew, and she quietly said into her earpiece to Lang, "He is protecting someone. This way of questioning is not working. We need a different plan." And Lang understood and ended the session after more than 2 hours without gaining any new information, as Hale remained completely silent and unshaken, and stepped out of the observation room knowing the time had come to act, and she told Lang and the main team, "We will set a trap, announce that Hale is being released because there is not enough direct evidence of organized theft, but we will follow him all the time, place a tracker on him, a hidden microphone, and a small camera, and if he contacts anyone, we will have clear proof." And the plan was carried out quickly, as that same afternoon MI5 officially announced that Thomas Hale was being released on temporary bail due to lack of evidence to charge him with organized theft, and he walked out of the back gate of the palace with a face showing carefully controlled relief. But as soon as he stepped into a taxi, a tiny tracking device had already been placed on the sole of his shoe, a microphone hidden inside a shirt button, and monitoring software secretly added to his phone without him knowing, and Anne returned to her study with her heart beating fast, knowing this plan was a big risk, because if Hale did not contact anyone, the plan would fail. But if he did, they would finally have undeniable evidence, and later that evening an alert sounded as Hale left his small apartment on the edge of London and walked to an old pub in Southern called the Anchor Tap, a place mostly visited by locals and rarely by tourists, while the MI5 team followed him from a safe distance, and Hale went inside and chose a table in a dark corner. And about 10 minutes later a man wearing a long coat and a baseball cap entered, and even in the low-light facial recognition quickly confirmed it was Andrew Parker BS, who sat across from Hale and spoke in a low voice that was clearly recorded by the hidden microphone, as Hale whispered, "I did not tell them anything, just like you told me," and Andrew let out a breath of relief but still sounded tense as he replied, "Good, stay completely silent, do not contact anyone else, I am working on a solution, and if you need money urgently, I will send more, but do not do anything foolish, Camilla is very worried." 2. And Hale nodded with a face showing both fear and hope as he asked, "What about the jewelry? We did not get anything." And Andrew tightened his fist and said, "Forget it, the plan is finished. The important thing is that you do not mention anyone, because if you talk, we are both finished." and the meeting lasted less than 15 minutes before Andrew left first and Hale stayed a little longer before leaving. And the entire conversation was recorded clearly along with location and time data from the tracker, and when the report reached Anne at midnight, she sat alone in her room and listened to the recording 3 times, hearing Andrew's voice sounding cold yet slightly shaking when he said Camila is very worried too, and turned off the device and stood by the window as rain began falling again, the drops hitting the glass like a fast heartbeat. And she felt both anger and disappointment as she realized that not only Andrew but Camila was also involved, and she immediately called Charles and said in a calm but firm voice, "Charles, we have evidence. Andrew met Hale tonight and mentioned Camila. We need to act quickly." And Charles sighed deeply before replying, "All right, keep watching Andrew and do not let him know what we have. We need more proof so no one can deny it." And nodded even though he could not see her, knowing that the situation had now entered a new stage with no turning back. And without wasting any time after receiving the recording, Princess Anne decided to act immediately by requesting a private and unannounced meeting with Andrew, with no press and no one outside the main security team informed, and the meeting was arranged at Andrew's private house in Wiltshire to avoid attention from the media. Anne arrived with MI5 team leader Robert Lang and 2 agents, but only she and Lang went inside, where Andrew greeted them in his usual polished manner, wearing a perfectly fitted suit and a small smile, though his eyes showed signs of stress and worry, and he led them into a large living room where paintings of cavalry scenes on the walls reminded everyone of his proud military past, and he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "Your Royal Highness, it is an honor to have you here," and sat across from him and looked straight into his eyes before saying, "We know you met Hale last night. We also know what you talked about. You told him to stay silent. You mentioned Camila, and you promised to handle everything." Andrew's face went pale for a brief moment, but he quickly pulled himself together, letting out a small laugh as he shook his head and said, "Your Highness, there must be some misunderstanding. I met Thomas because he is an old friend from the army. He had just been released, and I was only checking on him and offering support, nothing more." Button did not move or show any doubt, and she gave a signal to Lang to play a short 30-second clip, just enough for Andrew's voice to be clearly recognized, and Andrew sat completely still as his hands gripped the armrests so tightly that his knuckles turned white, trying hard to stay calm as he said, "That could be edited audio. Modern technology can do many things. I have no connection to any plan." Button replied in a cold voice, "We have location records, exact timestamps, and the call you made to Hale right after we left here yesterday. You told him again to stay silent and promised to handle everything. Did you really think we were not watching?" And Andrew stayed silent for a long time as panic finally showed clearly on his face, while Anne continued firmly, "Andrew, stop denying it. We know the plan. Take rarely used jewelry, ask for ransom, and split the money, and Camila was part of it too. You introduced Hale and she gave the advance payment. This is no longer a personal issue. This is a betrayal of the crown." And Andrew turned his face away with a shaking voice and said, "I did not want to hurt anyone. I was just desperate. I had debts and was facing bankruptcy. I thought this plan would harm no one. Just borrow the items for a short time, collect ransom, and return everything. I was wrong." Button shook her head, her voice filled with both anger and disappointment, as she said, "You believed the royal family would stay quiet to hide a theft. You believed we would allow traitors to live peacefully. You made a serious mistake." And the meeting ended in heavy silence as Anne and Lang left without saying another word, leaving Andrew standing alone in the living room with a pale face and cold sweat running down his temple. And less than 30 minutes after Anne left, Andrew picked up a burner phone and tried to call Hale. But there was no answer, and MI5 reported this attempt to Anne immediately, and she listened before gripping the phone tightly, realizing that Andrew had not stopped and was still trying to control the situation, erase evidence, and protect both himself and Camila. And this action only made the case stronger because it showed he was trying to cover things up and desperately fix a failed plan. So Anne called Charles right away and said, "Charles, Andrew called Hale right after we left. He is trying to erase evidence, telling Hale to stay silent and promising to arrange a lawyer. We now have enough to arrest him." And she knew the final moment was very close, because Andrew was acting out of desperation and every move he made was tightening the trap around him, leaving no way to escape as the betrayal of the royal family was about to be fully revealed. And the next morning Buckingham Palace woke up to a very different feeling, as the worried whispers and secret meetings had disappeared and were replaced by a cold and firm determination, as if the entire royal family had prepared themselves to face the coming storm. And Princess Anne walked into the security briefing room with steady steps, holding a thick file that contained all the evidence she and the MI5 team had gathered over the past few days, and on the large table lay clear and undeniable proof. And Anne looked around the room where King Charles sat at the head of the table with a serious but determined expression, while MI5 Director Robert Lang and several senior agents sat nearby, and although the room felt heavy, there was no more hesitation, and Anne began speaking in a calm but powerful voice. "We now have enough to end this. There is no need to wait any longer. Today we will question Hale one final time and then confront Andrew directly." And Charles slowly nodded and said, "And I trust you, but I want this handled internally first, if possible. No scandal should reach the public, and agreed because she understood that making it public too soon would create a huge media storm and damage the reputation of the monarchy, so they needed to stay in control of the situation, and the final questioning of Hale took place at 10 a.m. in a private security room, but this time there were no harsh lights or heavy pressure. Instead the room was brighter and Anne herself was present, and Hale was brought in without handcuffs, though his eyes were full of fear. Anne spoke gently but seriously. "Thomas, we have everything, the recording of Andrew meeting you, the call after that, and the money transfers. There is no way out now. Tell the truth and we will consider being lenient. You have a family and a daughter, do not make this worse." And Hale lowered his head as his shoulders shook, and after nearly a minute of silence he looked up and said in a weak voice, "It was Andrew Parker BS came to me first. He said he urgently needed money because his business had failed. He promised me £500,000 if I took a few rarely used items from the archive. He arranged my shift and gave me the tool to open the lock, and later Queen Camilla met me in person and gave me £20,000 in advance along with detailed instructions. She said the family would quietly pay the ransom without letting it become public, and although Anne was not surprised, her heart still felt heavy, and she signalled Lang to record everything as the confession was clearly captured and signed by Hale, leaving no space for denial. And that same afternoon Andrew Parker BS was called to the palace, not as a friendly visit but as a direct order, and he arrived trying to appear calm. But the moment he entered the room and saw Anne, Charles, and the head of MI5, he understood that everything was finished, and he sat down with shaking hands as Anne pushed the file of evidence toward him, filled with photos, recordings. And Hale signed confession, and she said in a cold but controlled voice, "Mr. Andrew, we have Hale's confession. You were the one who first contacted him, planned everything, and Camilla was also involved. There is nothing left to deny," Anne said firmly, and Andrew looked down at the papers before slowly raising his eyes toward Charles, his voice breaking as he spoke. "I never wanted to harm the royal family. I was just desperate. My debts destroyed me. I believe this plan will hurt no one. Just take the items for a short time, ask for ransom, and return everything. I was wrong." And Charles stayed silent for a long moment, looking at the man who had once been his wife's husband and once part of the royal circle, before finally saying in a heavy voice, "Andrew, you broke trust, not only mine but the trust of the entire institution. You and Camilla put personal gain above honor." And Andrew lowered his head as tears ran down his face, offering no more excuses because he knew there was no way out. And that same evening the internal case was brought to an end as Andrew Parker BS was taken into custody and held in a special security facility while waiting to be handed over to legal authorities, and Camilla was called for a private meeting with Charles, a long and serious conversation that lasted for hours, kept completely secret and ending in deep silence. And although she was not arrested right away, all her public duties were stopped and a separate investigation was started. And now the question remains, in your opinion, do Camilla and her former husband Andrew Parker BS still have feelings for each other, or were they only helping each other out of personal interest? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more, and also click on the next video shown on your screen.